Someone who avoids conflict feels tension rising in a conversation. They notice the shift in tone, the edge creeping into someone's voice, the moment where disagreement is about to become something more, and everything in them screams to make it stop, to smooth it over, to agree, apologize, change the subject, anything to return to calm. So they swallow what they were going to say. They nod when they want to shake their head. They smile when their jaw is tight. They say it's fine when nothing is fine. And if you've ever been that person, if you've ever felt your own truth die in your throat because speaking it might create friction, then you know this isn't about being agreeable. This isn't about keeping the peace. This is about survival. About a nervous system that learned, somewhere along the way, that conflict equals danger, and danger must be avoided at all costs, even when the cost is yourself. People who avoid conflict carry a particular kind of silence. Not the comfortable silence of having nothing to say, but the heavy silence of having everything to say, and no permission to say it. They move through relationships biting their tongue, swallowing their needs, accommodating preferences that clash with their own. They become experts at reading rooms, at sensing when their opinion might create tension, at calculating whether their truth is worth the potential disruption it might cause. And the answer, almost always, is no. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. The temporary discomfort of staying silent feels more manageable than the terrifying unknown of what happens if they speak up. So they don't. And the silence accumulates, and something inside them slowly disappears. Someone asks, "Why didn't you just say something? Why did you let it get this far?" And you don't know how to explain that. Saying something isn't simple when your brain has coded confrontation as catastrophic, that your nervous system doesn't distinguish between healthy disagreement and genuine threat, that the moment tension appears, your body floods with the same chemicals it would release if you were in actual danger. Your heart races, your throat closes. Your mind goes blank or races with catastrophic predictions, and in that state, speaking feels impossible. Silence feels like the only option that keeps everyone, including you, safe. Even when that safety is an illusion. Even when that silence is destroying you from the inside. Most people think conflict avoidance is about being passive or weak. But people who live this pattern understand the truth. It's not passivity. It's hypervigilant. It's a finely tuned system designed to prevent something your mind has decided is intolerable. And that something isn't the disagreement itself. It's what you learned disagreement means. Abandonment, anger, withdrawal of love, emotionally explosions, punishment through silence, relationships ending. Whatever your early experiences taught you about what happens when people don't get along, that's what your nervous system is still trying to prevent. Even though you're no longer a child, even though the people in your life now aren't the people who taught you that lesson, the system doesn't know that. Eat, Hust knows conflict equals threat. Avoid threat at all costs. There is a contradiction in you, a war between the part that knows you have a right to speak and the part that's terrified of what happens if you do. You rehearse conversations in your mind, perfect articulations of what you need to say. You plan how you'll set a boundary, how you'll express disagreement, how you'll advocate for yourself. And then the moment comes. The person is in front of you. The opportunity is there. And every word you prepared evaporates. What comes out instead is agreement you don't mean, accommodation you resent, a smile that doesn't reach your eyes, and afterward, you feel a mixture of relief and self-loathing. Relief that you avoided confrontation, loathing that you abandoned yourself again. People who avoid conflict often carry an invisible curriculum. They know what it's like to feel physical symptoms when tension arises, rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, nausea, the overwhelming urge to flee. They know how to change their opinion mid-sentence, when they sense it's not being well received. They know what it's like to agree to things that violate their values because disagreeing feels too dangerous. They know how to become invisible in group settings where differing views are being expressed. They know the exhaustion of monitoring everyone else's emotional state to prevent potential conflict before it even starts. They develop peacekeeping skills that others mistake for natural diplomacy. But this isn't diplomacy. It's self-erasure, dressed as harmony. Research in psychology shows that conflict avoidance often originates in childhood environments where conflict was handled poorly. Maybe you grew up with a parent whose anger was explosive and unpredictable. Maybe disagreement in your household led to days of cold silence that felt like abandonment. Maybe you were punished for expressing opinions that differed from your parents. Maybe you witnessed destructive fights between caregivers that terrified you. Maybe you were the peacemaker, the child who learned that keeping everyone calm was your job. In these environments, the child's nervous system makes an adaptation. It learns that conflict isn't a normal part of relationships that can be navigated and resolved. It's a threat to connection, to safety, to survival, and that learning persists into adulthood, long after the original circumstances have changed. There's a particular exhaustion that comes with avoiding conflict. Not the exhaustion of fighting, but the exhaustion of not fighting, of holding everything in, of constantly managing your own reactions to keep situations calm, of accommodating endlessly, of saying yes when you mean no, of pretending things are fine when they're not, of carrying resentment that has nowhere to go because expressing it would create the very confrontation you're trying to avoid. This exhaustion is invisible to others. They see someone easygoing, someone flexible, someone who never causes problems. They don't see someone slowly suffocating under the weight of unexpressed truth. What makes this particularly painful is how it affects relationships. People who avoid conflict often attract people who don't. They end up in dynamics where the other person's preferences dominate because they never express their own, where their needs go unmet because they never voice them, where resentment builds on their side while the other person has no idea anything is wrong, and when the relationship eventually breaks, or they finally explode, after years of swallowing their truth, the other person is shocked. They had no idea. How could they? You never said anything. You always seemed fine, and you were fine until you weren't. Until the accumulated weight of all those swallowed words became unbearable. People who avoid conflict often develop a complicated relationship with anger. They fear it in others. They suppress it in themselves. They've learned to see anger as destructive rather than informative, as something that damages relationships rather than something that, when expressed healthfully, can actually strengthen them by bringing issues into the open. So when they feel angry, they don't express it directly. It comes out sideways, through passive aggression, through withdrawal, through doing the silent treatment they claim to hate, through sudden explosions that seem to come out of nowhere but have actually been building for months or years. There's also a way that conflict avoidance becomes a form of control. If you can keep everything calm, if you can prevent disagreements from happening, then you feel safe. The moment conflict emerges, you lose that control and the anxiety becomes overwhelming. So you work harder to prevent it. You accommodate more, you suppress more, you manage everyone's emotions more carefully, and this creates a paradox. You're trying to control the situation to feel safe, but the act of controlling requires you to abandon yourself. And abandoning yourself doesn't create real safety. It just creates the illusion of it, while slowly destroying your sense of self. What people don't understand about conflict avoidance is that it's not about disliking disagreement. Many conflict avoiders can handle intellectual debates just fine when the stakes feel low. What they can't handle is conflict that threatens connection. Disagreement with someone they care about. Tension with someone whose approval they need. Confrontation with someone who has power over them. In those situations, the perceived threat isn't about the topic being discussed. It's about the relationship itself. About whether expressing disagreement will cause the other person to withdraw love, to get angry, to leave. And for someone whose nervous system learned that conflict equals relational catastrophe, that risk feels impossible to take. Sleep often becomes difficult for people who avoid conflict after situations where they didn't speak up. They lie awake, replaying the conversation, thinking about what they should have said, feeling the frustration of having silenced themselves again. Or they ruminate about potential conflicts they're anticipating, rehearsing how they'll handle them, worrying about what might happen. Their mind can't rest because unexpressed truth and anticipated confrontation both create a state of internal tension that the body can't fully relax from. But here's something crucial that people who avoid conflict need to hear. Conflict itself isn't the problem. Destructive conflict is the problem. And there's a profound difference between the two. Healthy conflict, where two people express different needs or perspectives while maintaining respect and care for each other, actually strengthens relationships. It creates understanding. It allows both people to be seen. It builds trust, because both people learn they can have disagreements, and the relationship survives. But if you never experienced healthy conflict, if the only model you had was destructive or terrifying, then your nervous system never learned this distinction. All conflict registered as threat, and that registration is still running your behavior. The pattern of avoiding conflict creates a painful irony. You're trying to protect relationships by not creating tension. But relationships can't be truly intimate without the ability to navigate difference, without both people being able to express their authentic thoughts and needs. What you're protecting isn't real connection. It's a performance of connection, a version where you disappear so the other person can be comfortable. And while that might look like harmony from the outside, it's hollow, because they're not in relationship with you. They're in relationship with the accommodating version of you, the real you, with needs and boundaries and opinions that might differ from theirs. Never shows up. There's a moment that often comes for people who avoid conflict. A moment where the cost of silence finally exceeds the fear of speaking. Maybe it's when they realize a relationship can't continue if they keep pretending. Maybe it's when the resentment becomes so heavy they can't carry it anymore. Maybe it's when they watch someone else set a boundary with ease and realize it's possible to survive confrontation. Maybe it's simply exhaustion from performing harmony they don't feel. And in that moment, something shifts. Not completely, not all at once, but enough to try something different. Something changes when people who avoid conflict begin to practice speaking up in small, low-stakes situations. When they start by expressing preferences about where to eat or what movie to watch. When they experiment with saying, actually, I see it differently in conversations where disagreement won't threaten a crucial relationship. When they learn, through repeated experience, that their nervous system's catastrophic predictions don't come true. That most people can handle hearing no. That healthy relationships can hold difference. That conflict doesn't equal connection ending. These small experiences begin to rewire the association. Slowly, the nervous system learns a new pattern. Disagreement doesn't equal danger. Expressing needs doesn't equal abandonment. Conflict can be navigated. People who work through conflict avoidance often discover something liberating. That the thing they were most afraid of, losing the relationship by speaking up, was actually happening anyway through their silence. That staying quiet didn't protect the connection. It prevented real connection from forming. And that when they finally started showing up authentically, when they finally started expressing their truth, even when it created discomfort, the relationships worth having didn't end. Because now two real people were relating instead of one real person and one performance. And maybe the most important truth of all is this. Your voice matters. Your needs matter. Your boundaries matter. Even when expressing them creates tension. Even when others are uncomfortable with them. Even when it would be easier to just go along. You are not responsible for managing everyone else's emotional experience of your truth. You're allowed to disagree. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to have needs that differ from others. That's not causing conflict. That's being human. And humans in healthy relationships learn to navigate difference together. But they can only do that if both people show up. If both people speak. If both people are willing to tolerate temporary discomfort for the sake of authentic connection. If you are someone who avoids conflict, who swallows their truth to keep the peace, who accommodates endlessly to prevent tension, then maybe it's time you hear this. You're not weak. You're not difficult for having needs. You're not too sensitive for finding confrontation hard. You learn to avoid conflict because conflict in your past wasn't safe. But you're not in your past anymore. And the people in your life now may be capable of hearing your truth, may be capable of holding space for your needs, may be capable of navigating disagreement without abandoning you. But you'll never know unless you try. Start small. Start safe. But start. Your voice deserves to exist in your relationships. And the ones who can't handle you speaking, they're not your people. The ones who stay, who adjust, who appreciate knowing the real you, even when it's uncomfortable. Those are the relationships worth having, and they're only possible when you finally stop avoiding the conflict of showing up as yourself.